All right, in this video, we're going to go over some of the history of the attempts. There's lots of prior attempts of a digital currency before Bitcoin. So um, Bitcoin was an invention, but it also referenced heavily several of its predecessors, and these attempts go back decades. And it was a group known as the cypherpunks that was behind all these attempts. They were very active, talking amongst each other, very collaborative, and they were the ones pushing all of these digital money efforts. And really, their motivation stemmed from a big concern for individual privacy, and they had and this was from following World War II or even during World War II. They had noticed this enormous ability the governments had to spy, to surveil, to eavesdrop on communications, and there really wasn't any check to the government power to do that. And they wanted to protect the internet from this power, and they wanted to guarantee that all individuals could have complete privacy while on the internet. And the biggest example of this was PGP, which was a cypherpunk initiative. And this was a protocol that it really just made it very easy for anyone to communicate with essentially 100% privacy. And there was a fight over this. The powers that be in the United States, they put up a big fight over this. They took Zimmerman to court, put him through criminal proceedings for about a few years. But Zimmerman did eventually win the battle. But I'm sure it wasn't pleasant. And then same thing with money. The cypherpunks were fighting for the same idea. They wanted privacy and money, and that's what a lot of these attempts boiled down to. So add a little more to our timeline. We had David Chaum here, who was the founder of DigiCash in 1990, which used the concepts from a paper he wrote in 1985. And in this paper, he was essentially proposing a different type of credit card. He said, look, when you use a credit card, you're giving all this data to banks, shops, merchants. Any one of them can aggregate your data very easily, and they know everything about you. You no longer have any privacy. So he wanted to provide a credit card that had complete privacy, and it was based on cryptographic functions. He had one bank that adopted it, but by and large, no one really wanted to use it. People were okay sticking with their credit cards. And then next we had Micromint. This wasn't actually put into business. It was just an idea, but it did come from a very renowned person. And the idea was that banks would invest in computing equipment and electricity. Every month, banks would create and issue new coins. These coins would only last a month, and they could be used to pay completely anonymously. And they could also be used for microtransactions, 1 cent, 5 cent, very small transactions. And then this debt would be aggregated over time and then settled with the bank, in routine intervals. Micromint really had no interest from the banks, but very important development out of Micromint was this idea here. This was kind of in my opinion, this was an eye-opening moment to the cypherpunks. I think this was a really good description of the problem that they faced, as they had to figure out a way to prevent double spend in transactions without requiring the trust of a third party. So although this fell short, it gave a really good understanding of what the problem was moving forward. And then the next major milestone, the Hashcash, started trying to address this problem. Now we need to go a little bit into a piece of work here in the idea of asymmetry, which is a key piece of Hashcash. And then the proof of work concept was aimed specifically at spam email. But it applies to email, but it's really just information or anything with zeros and ones. So here Alice wants to give Bob some zeros and ones, and it might be spam. So Bob has this mechanism he can say, hang on, before you send me this, I need to know that you've done a little bit of work, at least a little bit of time, some money, some effort, use some hardware. That way I'm just going to, otherwise, if you don't do that, I'm just going to assume you just send a million emails at once and you're just spam. So what proof of work describes is a protocol where Alice can use a hash function, and we'll cover a hash in more detail. and then she can provide Bob an output. And this output is going to be based on her computer power, her data, the electricity, time, and so on. And the idea is very asymmetric. So it can take Bob, let's say, 0.001 of a second to verify that Alice had to spend, 1 second of work. And that way he knows Alice did not just send a million emails. He knows that she's not spam. And so what's interesting here is there's also no money. So the only thing that you're spending, that you're committing, are computer resources or actual work. You're using time, electricity, hardware, energy. Your work here is your proof. It is your cash. So that's hence the name Hashcash. And also, one last important point on proof of work is it was a way, it was the first instance of connecting real-world resources to cyberspace, to just zeros and ones. So now, taking this back to our original problem statement, in terms of zeros and ones, it's very easy for computers to just copy and paste. And now, with proof of work, we had this concept where you could assign a real-world and easily verifiable cost, any amount of cost, and you could start fighting back against this. So this was a powerful idea, but there really was no way to operationalize this concept across the world. And next we had, following this, we had B-Money. And again, B-Money was just an idea. It was a white paper. And he took the previous concepts and added on top of that linked timestamping. Linked timestamping came from a paper on timestamping and a company that was founded on this. And the concept was to take blocks of data over time and connect them using the proof of work hash outputs. And then every now and then, actually one time a week, the hash would be released into the New York Times. So their customers would had various needs, would provide them, data, groups of data. This would happen over time, and the data would find its way inside of one of these blocks. And what you had was, these customers were part of a long chain of hash-connected data with weekly publications of the hash of that data. And the takeaway here is that this data was extremely secure. These were the needs of the customers: authentic, tamper-proof. So if you wanted to forge this data, you'd have to go back to every single historical copy of the New York Times in every single library, public house, or private house all over the world, and you'd have to go back and change those actual newspapers and change the hash result in the newspapers. It's completely infeasible, and this company is actually still in operations today. So the idea of B-Money, or the concept in B-Money, was let's just copy this. So let's use financial data, and financial transactions would be blocked and then linked together. And this is a very big idea. So now we had this theory. It was theoretically possible by using cryptography and chaining together blocks of financial data in a decentralized manner. You could solve both of these problems. With linked timestamping, you cannot have a double spend. It's impossible to forge. You don't need, so you're solving that problem. And then with a decentralized collection of users, you no longer have a central authority. There is no more problem of trust. But this was all still very much a theory. And then, at this point in '98, we had now combined all these cryptographic tools, but these problems still remained. Then we had BitGold, which tried and failed to implement the B-Money concepts. But even though Szabo fell short, he gave a really good, refined understanding of what a big remaining problem, which was how to keep a consensus, how to keep users in consensus, what kind of mechanism to keep users honest. So for another recap, at this point we had all the technologies now and concepts in place for theoretical currency, 100% in cyberspace, all secured by cryptography, and then we had a list of obstacles that we had identified as preventing it. And it was on this foundation that Bitcoin was built. So one, Bitcoin created a currency. It just did it over a long period of time. We'll talk more about the reasons for this why, and these were the mechanisms to do so. And two, there was a cap set on the amount of money supply. So the result of this is very important. I wish this box could come out of the screen and just punch you right in the face. That's how important this is. We've covered this in previous videos. We've walked through how money has evolved over time. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans have sought these properties in money. Humans have owned their money. This is how they sought to solve their problem of exchange. Bitcoin meets these properties. This gave value to Bitcoin, value that cannot be changed. Combine this with the gradual supply over time, this provided the aligned incentives. This aligned Bitcoin to solve all of these problems. So in conclusion, the value Bitcoin had value. Bitcoin had value that cannot be changed. This was combined with certain currency creation mechanisms, and it allowed Bitcoin to address all of the lessons learned from the last 30 years of prior attempts.